Again for the urban goddess Sister Mort for that interesting and beautiful and fantastical and informative presentation on the alchemy of childbirth. I'm sure ones and ones would have got something from that. It's very interesting, you know, that most of us will grow up to be parents and we'll never really take lessons and understandings in childbirth science until we're actually in the situation. So it's very important to prepare for those things, you know, beforehand, things and please. We're going to move on. Yeah, very, very swiftly onto the Black History Man himself. Many of us, when we come on our spiritual journey, we tie back to the ancient Nile Valley, ancient Kemet, and we hear of a book that is called the Book of Coming Forth by Day, also known as the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But very few of us actually develop an in-depth understanding and knowledge of this text, what it means, what's in it, and how we can use it or understand it in our daily lives today. Well, brothers and sisters, you are in luck, because the Black History Man himself has done the work, has done the study, is doing the work, is doing the study, and is here to expound upon the true message within the Egyptian Book of the Dead for you right about now. So show your love for the Black History Man himself, author of the legendary classic When We Ruled. He goes by the name of Brother Robin Walker. Show me love, show me love, show me love. Peace.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. It's called What is the Main Message Behind the Book of the Dead? So why are we here? Obviously, Black History Month. Also, this is an opportunity to share some powerful information on African history and heritage, particularly religious heritage, spiritual heritage, and I have to thank, obviously, the Doctor's Posse for inviting me to this event. Hopefully, I'm going to be speaking for half an hour, and I'll make sure that I give you value. I won't waste anyone's time, so let's get straight into it. All right. To introduce the topic area, here's a passage from the Book of the Dead, and this passage is from chapter 18. It says, "Make the word of Osiris truth against his enemies. Raise up the Jed, which image the resurrection of the God. Let the mummy type of the eternal be once more erected as the mainstay and divine support of all." That is the main message. Make the word of Osiris truth, and make the mummy type of Osiris your mainstay and divine support. Alright, so about this presentation, I'm going to address two themes. In the Duat, or the mysteries of Amenta, and the second theme is in the Hall of the Two Ma'ats. First of all, what was the Book of the Dead? It's a papyrus roll, and when the scholars unraveled it, they found that generally they were about 1 meter across, but 40 meters in length. And what would happen is, in terms of width, sometimes 15 centimeters, sometimes 45 centimeters. And on the backs of these papyrus rolls was the Egyptian words, Peret en Heru. What does that mean? Peret en Heru, coming forth by day. Some people interpret that as coming alive, becoming awake. And when we look at the papyrus rolls, what context? Well, we have to keep it real. Death is a business. And what would happen is the names and titles of the owner were often written in a different hand to the scribe who wrote or copied the text. And this suggests that the rolls were produced in workshops awaiting orders for new dead people. And the texts were probably kept in some kind of archival or storage system before being purchased. Once purchased, the names will be put on it. And one particular example The most famous example is Papyrus of Ani. So, how do we interpret this? What we have here is Ani and Tutu on the left-hand side, and things are moving in this direction, and Ani's heart is being waved against a feather. And then right next to the judgment scene, you have Tehuti, who's got written down everything you've ever done in your life. And you better make sure that your heart is as light as a feather. You don't want a heavy heart. And sitting in judgment, you've got 1, 2 people there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people in judgment. And then when we get to the next part of the papyrus, what do we have? We have Horus taking Ani by the hand to meet his father. Why is this happening? Because no one gets to the Father unless they get there via the Son. Alright, so what is actually in the Book of the Dead? Well, there's an introductory adoration scene, and then we have the different chapters. So chapter 1 speaks of the dead person's arrival in the netherworld, in the underworld, in the duat. Chapter 17 has the dead person identifying with the deity Atu. And there are chapters of the dead person to secure their essential abilities that they would need to negotiate the netherworld. Some of the chapters refer to the heart, or the id. Others call for protection against dangerous animals. You have chapters on providing air and water in the necropolis for the benefit of the dead person. You have chapters that allowed for the dead person to transform. What could you transform into? You could transform into a bar, or the deity Ptah, a crocodile, a snake, etc. Chapter 89 concerns the bar regularly reunited with the corpse at night. You have chapters that concern the journey of the dead in the boat of Ra. You have chapters concerning the gates and their demon-like guardians. You have chapters concerning the knowledge of the mysterious regions such as the 14 mounds of the netherworld. You have chapter 125 is the judgment scene before Osiris. And this is what the British Museum claim. They claim, and I'm quoting now, this spell seems to form the core of each role. Why that's important is they'll say chapter 125 is the most important chapter in the Book of the Dead. So when I give this presentation, I'm going to talk about chapter 125. And this tells us 125 is the centerpiece, is the core, is the crux of the Egyptian belief system. Alright, let's get straight into it. Our first thing, the first part of this presentation, I'm going to talk about in the duat, or the mysteries of Amenta. Okay, someone dies. What happens next? Well, the Greek historian Herodotus explains what the Egyptian ritual would be. And this is a ritual. In the case of a person in whose houses there perishes a man of some consequence, all the females from these houses smear their heads with dust, and sometimes also the face. And then they leave the corpse in the house, and themselves wander throughout the town, beat their breasts with garments girt up, revealing their breasts, and with them all their female relatives. And the males beat their breasts separately, these too with their garments girt up. When they have done this, so do they carry forth the corpse to be mummified. That's a direct quote from Herodotus' text. He's explaining exactly what would happen when someone dies. Okay, so what happens next? The dead were now in the realm of the duats. So what's the duat? You could call it the netherworld, you could call it the underworld, you could even call it the inside of the body of the deity Nut. And in the ancient Egyptian art, it is shown as a land with fields, rivers, lakes, pathways, caverns. They had living creatures there, and this all emphasizes the Egyptian landscape that the ancient Egyptians, or Kemetu, would know. But it also contains some strange things: turquoise trees, iron walls, fire lakes, emphasizing elements of strangeness. And there were also buildings with their gates and openings. Some of the places, such as the fire lakes, scholars have identified where those are, and that is the Central African Great Lakes region. So some of the Book of the Dead is definitely set in the Central African Great Lakes. Right, the dead person, some people like to use the Greek term the manes, is now travelling through the netherworld on foot or by boat. And what the manes would do is they would use heka, which is words of power, to open pathways and to banish darkness. The dead person was now on a voyage. Now where are they going? They are voyaging to dwell in the kingdom of Osiris, travel through the duat with Ra, or enter the fields of reeds. The fields of reeds is the same concept the ancient Greeks would copy and turn into their notion of the Elysian fields. One of the great historians, Massey, pictures the Manes as a pilgrim armed with his Book of the Dead as a papyrus roll, journeying through a mentor. In fact, holding onto your papyrus roll is specifically mentioned in chapter 15 of the Book of the Dead. Now, to get to these locations, the dead person must negotiate, which means get past the challenges faced by the gates, get past the challenges faced by the mound, get past the challenges faced by the gates. And we must avoid the punishments reserved for the unrighteous. So how do we negotiate the gates? Well, the gates provided the protective ring around the kingdom of Osiris. And to pass through these gates, one had to get past frightening divine beings armed with knives. Each gate had 3 beings in the area. There was the keeper, there was the guard, and there was its announcer. All 3 must be got past in this journey you're making through the underworld. So how do you get through the gates? Well, chapter 144 gives you the words you need to say. And the words are, make way for me, for I know you, I know your name, and I know the name of the God who guards you, mistress of darkness. Its height cannot be known from its breadth, and its extent in space cannot be discovered. Snakes are on it, of which the number is not known. It was fashioned before the inert one is your name. He who was joined together is the name of the doorkeeper. So you've got to say that to get past the gates. And then you have other guards that you have to get past with pleasant names such as who hacks up the human dead, who dances in blood, and sharp of knife against the talker. You can work out sharp of knife against the talker. That's the guardian up there dealing with politicians and other people engaged in trickology. Alright, so what else? Negotiating the mounds. The mounds are important for 2 reasons. That's what they look like in the Book of the Dead, and they existed in the Egyptian landscape, and secondly, they represented the deity Ptah emerging from the watery abyss of Nun, as in the creation story. So how do you negotiate the mounds? What are you supposed to say? Chapter 149 of the Book of the Dead says, the 4th mount, green. The deceased says, as for the chief of the mysterious mount, as for the very high mountain, which is in the realm of the dead, in which the sky sets, it is 300 rods long by 150 rods wide. A snake is on it called caster of knives, and it is 70 cubits when it glides. It lives by decapitating the spirits of the dead in the realm of the dead. I rise up against you. This is you talking to the snake now. So that navigation may be carried out aright. I have seen the way to you, and I will gather myself together against you, for I am the male. Cover your head, for I am hail. Hail is mighty. I am one mighty of magic, and my eyes have caused me to benefit therefrom. So that's what you're supposed to say when you're negotiating the mounds, according to chapter 149 of the Book of the Dead. Now, the dead person would also have to negotiate caverns or caves, and each cavern was occupied by one or more divine beings. The dead person also had to know about the other
beings that existed in the netherworld. So who were these other beings? The souls of the east, the souls of the west, and the souls of the ancient Nile Valley cities of Heliopolis, Hermopolis, Nekhen, and Pe. Now, Heka was also used to protect the Medes in other ways. Now, if you look at what's on this side, you see it's a papyrus roll. And I will explain the importance of that in a minute. So, chapter 27 in the Book of the Dead speaks of the divine power who sees his hearts and can therefore turn your heart against you in the judgment seat. And it's important to protect the car just in case the relative did not supply the correct offerings. Another thing is chapter 105 freed the dead person from dependence on their relatives and priests if they wore the correct papyrus around their necks. And this is what Professor Taylor of the British Museum says. The illusion is to the practice of wearing around the neck a small roll of papyrus inscribed with a protective text. So that roll of papyrus will be rolled up and then worn around your neck. So what's the point of this? In other African cultures, the same thing happens. This is a painting of the famous Ayuba Suleiman Diallo. Some people call him Joe Ben Solomon. He was from Senegal, and he was painted in 1733. And in this case, he has a Quran around his neck. Now, becoming an Ak. All right. Chapter 61 protected the bath from being taken from its owner. Chapters 91, 92, and 188 protected the shoot or shadow. If all these elements of the self were successfully reunited, that person became an effective spirit or Ak, plural Aku. Becoming transformed in other ways. Well, chapters 76, 77, all the way up to 88 were transformation spells, allowing the Medes to become a falcon, a heron, a swallow, a snake, a crocodile, a lotus flower, or anything else that the person wished to transform into. And these forms were important in the dead person moving from the netherworld to the realm of the living. And this is where later religions have got the idea from of reincarnation. It's taken straight from chapter 76 to 88 of the Book of the Dead. Another set of challenges were dangerous animals, such as crocodiles and snakes, including the great evil enemy of Ra, known as the Apek demon. And chapter 31 mentions one of the spells you're supposed to say when you're fighting against these snakes, the crocodiles, and so on. And it says, "Get back, retreat, get back, you dangerous one. Do not come against me. Do not live by my magic. May I not have to tell this name of yours to the great God who sent you." Many believe that Apep battles nightly against Ra to stop Ra from rising on the eastern horizon with the rising of each sun, with Apep trying to stop that. So we've got this battle between good and evil, night and day. Yet another form of danger to avoid was the punishment of the unjustified. And many of these punishments were at the command of Osiris. These involved avoiding slaughter, putrefaction, having a rightful place taken, dying a second death, and avoiding traps such as the fishing net and the world working upside down. The world working upside down or the right way round is a type of danger that would involve, among other things, your digestive system working the wrong way round, and thus the victim drank urine and ate feces. There was a danger of drinking burning water or your supply of air in the necropolis failing. Again, there were utterances or spells that you would say that would protect the individual from these consequences. So summing up, there were gates, there were mounds, there were caverns, and their fearsome guardians. There were other spiritual beings, such as turquoise trees, iron walls, fire lakes, traps, and the world turned upside down. There were evil-minded divine beings and evil-minded serpents. And against this was the pilgrim, armed with his papyrus roll, armed with his divine protection because of the knowledge of the secrets, the rituals, and the words of power. Now, what does all this sound like to you? This is every adventure story ever written. This is every horror story ever written. In other words, this is the most profound piece of literature in human history because everybody is rinsing this out. Everybody. And what's the message? The reason why you've got this almost nightmarish story is it's teaching you to confront your fears. It's teaching you to overcome your fears. It's teaching you have to keep going no matter what. Okay, now, Napoleon Hill, the author of the book Think and Grow Rich. Now, what on earth has that got to do with the Book of the Dead? Well, the answer is a lot more than you might think. Napoleon Hill's teachings, he's part of a school of scholars, beginning with the great Madame H.P. Blavatsky, and this team of scholars resurrecting ancient Egyptian thought, particularly the teachings of Tehuti, and they evolved it into Think and Grow Rich. And the message here is persistence. Keep going no matter what. Alright, now in the Hall of the Two Mahats, which is my second and final thing, the greatest individual challenge was the judgment. You had to come through the judgment unscathed. And there was a review of the whole person's life carried out in the presence of Osiris, involving the weighing of the heart to make sure you don't have a heavy and therefore a guilty heart. And it was at this point that the Manes was judged whether or not he or she was worthy to become an immortal. The justified were rewarded, the unjustified were punished. Now, from the time of Egyptian Dynasty 5, they wrote texts on good conduct or ma'at. And these involved maintaining the balance of society, showing reverence to the divine forces, supporting the less fortunate, and observing ritual practices. The righteous would also have to have made the words of Osiris truth against his enemies, as was stated in chapter 18 of the Book of the Dead. And Professor Taylor from the British Museum says, let's read this. These texts do not present a collective day of judgment for all humanity as in Christian doctrine, but the single episode undergone by each individual during the passage from life to their afterlife. Here's the point. Do not represent a collective judgment. Now, the significance of that is this. This teaches us that life is cyclical and the world is not coming to an end anytime soon. So if you hear Christian theologians saying we are in end times, you can work out where they got it from. They read and misunderstood chapter 125 in the Book of the Dead. And they made what should have been an individual story, a collective story for everyone. And that's why you end up with theologians making fools of themselves, claiming that we are in end times and the world is coming to an end. Now, judgment in the Hall of the Two Mahats. This is what chapter 125 says. This is the way to act in the Hall of the Two Mahats. A man says this speech when he is pure, clean, dressed in fresh cloths, shod in white sandals, painted with eye paint, anointed with the finest oil or myrrh. To enter, the individual had to answer questions posed by the divine beings on who he is and the mysteries of Osiris. Following this, he is invited to enter. And then when he enters the hall, the belief system was you've got Osiris sitting in judgment, and the dead person declares that he is innocent of the various sins before Osiris. He then makes 42 declarations of innocence before the 42 divine beings, also in judgment. So addressed to Osiris, praise to thee, thou great God, thou Lord of the two truths. I come to thee and bring thee truth, and chase away wrongdoing. I have committed no sins against mankind. I have not done that which the gods abhor. I have made no man evil in the eye of his superior. I have not caused to hunger. I have not caused to weep. I have done no murder. I have commanded no murder. I have not occasioned grief to any. And then what happens is, the other sins that the person has to confess that they did not do in front of Osiris is fraud in trade, stealing milk from children, stealing and injuring cattle, snaring sacred birds, fishing in lakes, diverting the Nile flood water, and stealing from the sacred temples. And then addressed to the 42 judges, to the first judge, O fast rider who came forth from Heliopolis, I have done no falsehood. To the second judge, O fire embracer who came forth from Kerahar, I have not robbed. From the third judge, O swallower of shades who came forth from the cavern, I have not stolen. To the next judge, I have not killed men. To the next judge, I have not stolen the God's offerings. To the next judge, I have not told lies. Now, is this sounding familiar? I have done no falsehood. I have not robbed. I have not stolen. I have not killed men. I have not stolen the God's offerings. I have not told lies. There are then 36 others to get us to our number of 42. Now, the summary of the declarations of innocence tell us that we should not be injuring, say the sacred or the dead, murder, oppression, theft, robbing minors, fraud, impurity, adultery, lying, slander, reviling, and eavesdropping. One great Egyptologist, Professor Adolf Ehrman, says, all of which are also condemned in our scheme of morality. There is only one which exceeds ours, the remarkable but fine command which forbids heart-eating, i.e. useless remorse. Let me comment on that. The point of the Book of the Dead is you're not being commanded. The point of the Book of the Dead is you are taking responsibility for doing ma'at, and I say that is an even higher ethical standard than being commanded by a superior force to do good. Therefore, I have not done is morally superior to thou shalt not do. And again, this exceeds our scheme of morality. So what are the implications for chapter 125 in everyday life? The Declaration of Virtues were obituary texts from the Old Kingdom period, and gradually they evolved and evolved and evolved into chapter 125. And one such example says, I gave bread to the hungry and clothes to the naked, and I gave a passage in my own boat to those who could not cross. I was a father to the orphan, a husband to the widow, a protection from the wind to the shivering. I am one who spake what was good and related what was good, not a scandal monger. I acquired my possessions in a just manner. The significance of that is, not only does the New Testament actually copy that almost word for word, but again, from a Napoleon Hill perspective, you only speak and relate that which is good. Because if you speak ill, you attract ill to you. Okay, following this was the weighing of the heart. In one pan was placed your heart, and the other was an ostrich feather, which represents ma'at. The heart should be as light as the feather, and that means you are a guiltless person. Now, have all the religions borrowed this idea? The idea of judgment in the balance. Loads of religions have copied from this. And outcome number one. Following this, Thoth says, I have judged the heart of the deceased, and his soul stands as a witness for him. His deeds are righteous in the great balance, and no sin has been found in him. The Horus then presents the deceased to Osiris, and the reason why Horus presents the deceased to Osiris is no one gets to the Father unless they get there through the Son. And then finally the individual says, here I am in your presence, O Lord of the West. There is no wrongdoing in my body. I have not wittingly told lies. There has been no second fault. Grant that I may be like the favoured ones, O Osiris, one greatly favoured by the good God, one loved of the Lord of the two lands, the deceased, vindicated before Osiris. Outcome two, if things went very, very badly, the individual faced the devourer, also called the devourer of the unjustified, the devourer of the damned, Some people call her the Lady of Ammit. And this beast was a female being, had the rear of a hippopotamus, the front half and forelegs of a lion, and the head of a crocodile. Those who faced the devourer and was eaten by the devourer becomes twice dead. So what else could happen? The books of the netherworld portray the unjustified burning in fiery furnaces, being decapitated or being dismembered. Professor Taylor of the British Museum says, the fiery furnaces seem to prefigure early Christian notions of hell. So where Christianity got its notions of hell from is from the ancient Egyptian books of the netherworld. And if you were successful, you now became one of the Ma Keru, which means true of voice. They would have their heart returned to them, and they stand with their arms raised in an attitude of joy, and they are sometimes supported by Ma'at and adorned with feathers. Once vindicated, what happens next? One objective was to become one with Ra and travel in his solar boat. And chapter 100 and 102 in the Book of the Dead allows the individual to navigate that boat and drive away the hostile serpent Apep, which is trying to stop Ra from rising each morning. Another objective was to enter the field of reeds, and the field of reeds is exactly the same idea that the ancient Greek religion copied and turned into the Elysian fields, perhaps located somewhere in the east. It was where Ra began his morning journey. It was a place where the deities and the justified lived forever in contentment and peace. The landscape had waterways, fields, and abundant crops. So what have we learned? We've learned about in the Duat, or the mysteries of Memento. And it reads just like an adventure story, it reads like a horror story. And the main message it's teaching is you have to be persistent. You have to face your fears, you have to conquer your fears, and you have to keep going no matter what. And in the Hall of the Two Ma'ats is the importance of living by Ma'at. So important that later religions have copied whole chunks out of this word for word. Alright, so this is the main message behind the Book of the Dead. I've been Robin Walker, the Black History Man. This concludes the presentation.